Thanks, John. I can't appreciate you. I can't think of a better way to kick off America's 250th or July 4th celebration than to talk about the journey to peace. What an incredible group of panelists we have here, and I think we provide an appropriate venue for this here in the middle of the Pacific, where we can really be a bridge to our neighbors in the Indo-Pacific region.
Some of your key takeaways from today. Why was this a unique happening? The Declaration of Independence. Why was this unique? And why was it revolutionary?
Is that my life has been driven much by the concepts that John enunciated, talked about, which is basically, look, we say it, the Declaration says it, everyone is created with equal rights. And the Constitution and the Declaration make it clear that we, the people, should be and are the masters of the government. I flash back to China, May of 1989. Some of you probably remember there were scores of thousands of common Chinese people. They all gathered in that Tiananmen Square. I happened to be there visiting too. And what I saw was people who were not demanding democracy, they were just demanding greater freedoms, to have that right to pursue their own individual happiness. At that point, what came out? The goddess of liberty came through the square. People had quickly built this imitation of our Statue of Liberty, saying all we want is freedom, the freedom to pursue our own happiness. They didn't use those words exactly, but that was the message. After that goddess of liberty, it was clear that nobody was going to abandon the square, and the government sent in tanks and soldiers to clear that square through brute force.
Inspirational note. In my lifetime, there have been 7 movements for freedom. And in every one of those, the American flag was flown by those who were fighting for their freedom. You saw it at Tiananmen Square, you saw it in Hong Kong, you saw it in Tehran a year ago. People think the United States was unified in fighting the British, when in fact about 30% of the population was still loyal to the Crown, particularly in the South, and only about 30 to 40% were involved in the rebellion, and those in between just wanted to be left alone. So that's a typical insurgency, civil war, if you will. And so that is the background.
This is Queen Elizabeth II at our 200th anniversary back in 4th of July, 1976, where she said, "We lost the American colonies because we lacked the statesmanship to know the time and the manner of yielding what it is impossible to keep."
The American Revolution is a classic example of misperception, right? And the value of accuracy of information. So British throughout the conflict have a fundamentally distorted and inaccurate view of the realities in the colonies. And of course, what Queen Elizabeth II is emphasizing here is the fundamental reality is that no power, no sovereign power ever likes to let anything go, right? Becoming an empire is profoundly challenging and profoundly expensive and profoundly beneficial. Very, very few new nation states in history have been created peacefully. Empires understood across the world, and the troubles in North America are re-evaluated and reassessed, and the British finally come to the pragmatic conclusion that the cost of trying to maintain British rule in North America exceeds the benefit. And actually, British war termination, the process of getting out of a conflict, which is nations get into conflicts very easily. Nations find it 10 times harder to get out of a conflict that they go on to become first major trading partners and then ultimately become allies and friends down the road. And there's an important moral there, right? You can fight a war, you can have enormous bitterness and resentment, but give the passage of time, a relationship can be transformed, and a positive, productive, mutually beneficial relationship can emerge out of conflict and chaos and destruction.
51 signers of the Declaration they went into this knowing that they would be considered as having been traitors to the British Crown. And they knew that the result of that action could be death by hanging. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but yes, indeed, a number of them captured by the British were hung.
Very interesting if you look at the original Declaration of Independence. Reality is that most of those signatories didn't sign on the 4th of July. Only a minority of the signatures were actually affixed on the 4th of July. And the majority waited to see what was going to happen to the people who signed first before they put their signatures on. So most of the additional signatures were added over the next few days, even to the extent of getting the signatures on it. Many of the signatories were afraid they were going to be hung if they put.
Well, a copy was sent to George Washington, who was in an encampment outside New York. The war had been going on for at least 9 months, almost a year. The Continentals had captured Boston, and General Howe and the British were looking to take New York. And so Washington had his army gathered, and he read the Declaration of Independence to all of his troops, so they would have an idea what they were fighting for.
The signers of the Declaration were all well-read, well-educated people who were aware of a lot of philosophical and intellectual debate going on, not just in Britain, but throughout Europe, about what are the rights of man.
One of the challenges of the United States having a written constitution is that it makes it significantly harder to make changes to the Constitution when you write it down, right? It's much easier to change a Constitution when it's unwritten, and most people don't actually have any idea what it is. Of course, the problem for the founding fathers was that they were terrified that they could replace the king, but create a system that would allow, particularly a military general, to seize power and act as a king, even if he wasn't named a king. And so that's why it was critically important to create a separation of power.
He felt that as a military officer, he should not be involved in signing a political document. Also, there were several members of his staff felt that he should become king, and indeed George Washington was adamant. We just fought a war to remove a king, and I cannot be a part of establishing a new one here. It's not what we fought for.
Remember, he wasn't the first choice to be Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. He's a compromise choice because the Continental Congress cannot agree upon the more popular choices. So he's a Virginian, he doesn't represent New England, he's not a Southerner, he's a compromise candidate. And he's in a very precarious position. There are half a dozen of his senior commanders are all vying to kick him out and replace him, and even to pursue political power. Honestly, without George Washington, we might not be sitting here today.
We celebrate the surrender at Yorktown. That's a great question, and I would commend you to the preamble of the Declaration, and I'll offer up to the panelists as well to comment. But remember, this thing was written, as you read that, it was let us offer and hear the opinions of mankind about this. And so the Declaration is really targeting the community of states in the international system, basically declaring that we're on the team as of right now.
You have new amendments to the Constitution. It's a difficult process, but you see a series of amendments saying, not only is slavery over, but, everybody has equal rights. Indeed, women should have the right to vote. Women under our Constitution now have the right to vote. No-brainer, but basically, you see the system adapt because...
The middle section after the preamble talks about the inalienable rights and then the purpose of government. And there's a warning in there. And that is that any time a government becomes destructive of these ends, meaning the protection of inalienable rights, It's the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Now, alter gets institutionalized, it seems, in the Constitution. But then it goes on to this warning that it can be abolished. It's the right of the people to right themselves by instituting new principles or new foundations and new principles of governance. So that's right in the Declaration. It's I can't overemphasize how brilliant the thinking was here.
Well, on the role of religion in the political entity of the United States, the Founding Fathers were deeply conflicted. They were all deeply spiritual and religious individuals, but they all remained deeply fearful of the potential consequences of creating a theologically oriented state. They had fled what they perceived to be religious persecution, and to create a state in which religion was a central feature of that state created potential for the imposition of a state religion. And that's why the separation of powers explicitly significantly limited the political role that religion could play in the U.S. Republic.
Perception that I gained from a Jordanian officer many years ago. He said that religion in politics only works if the entire nation follows one religion. And he said, your country is very diverse, and you've taken a very wise course in not having any one religion dictate your policies.
And said, not that there should be religion, but that there should be a common sense of morality guiding public affairs. And I think that that still has validity. You know, there are, I think, and maybe I'm unique in this, but I do believe that there are absolute rights and absolute wrongs. And almost all religion will agree with those, and almost everybody without a religion will agree with those. The erosion of those is worrisome, I believe.
There's a wide gulf between belief in a higher being and religions, which are doctrines, and man-made doctrines that are inspired, perhaps, but there's clearly a direct connection in the Declaration of Independence to the laws of nature and of nature's God. That's enshrined in that document. Now, what
I always think it's a dangerous thing for a nation to aspire to promote global peace. It's a wonderful ideal, but in the process, it's awfully easy to impose your worldview and your culture on someone else in order to achieve that peace.
This is amazing. We decided we were going to try and build a better world. It makes sense, you know, World War I had happened, that was horrible. World War II happened, that was even much worse. And all of a sudden we had nuclear weapons. But what did we decide to do? President Truman came up with what he called his 4 points. And the point is, we're going to spread our knowledge, our capabilities, our industry around the world. Part of it was self-interest, but part of it was a fear that countries that were poor, countries that were unhappy, were countries that were by definition unstable. So I would argue that the Truman Point 4 program, which became USAID after a while, and the Marshall Plan, which was directly geared towards making sure that Europe recovered as quickly as possible from the ravages of World War II, they were incredibly far-sighted. They were funded by the U.S. taxpayer, and they achieved a heck of a lot of good.
The deputy chief of the Vietnamese mission in London was in the class, and he did a presentation on the Vietnam War. And so I'm sitting there, basic right-wing wacko American, and this guy is talking about it. And it was interesting watching his perception. As he got up, he felt we got into Vietnam because we were focused on Europe. He said the status of France and its recovery from the war and its power was so important to us that we abandoned the Vietnamese in order to maintain France. We had to make compromises on our ideals to achieve a political goal in one region, but we sacrificed goodwill and position in another to achieve that. And unfortunately, those are the sorts of hard decisions you have to make if you're trying to establish a global peace.